I call on the Faith Impact Forum report, and I call on its convener, Karen.
Moderator, the Faith Impact Forum has a wide-ranging remit to report on. Its predecessors embodied in their titles words like nation, society, and world to give some sense of the extent of their reach. And while the name no longer does that, the content has become ever more all-embracing in its nature. The deliverances we present today are a select few, while the report, read in its entirety, offers a more substantial reflection of work undertaken. However, even that is only a part, and because the pace of change in our society and in our world is so rapid, so the Church's response is always, of necessity, developing. These are mightily challenging times for all of us. How we respond to these times is a witness to who we are as followers of Jesus. Global conflicts, food and fuel poverty, the emerging reality of climate crisis, overstretched public services, continuing tension over migration, along with the treatment of refugees and those seeking asylum, ethical questions at the cutting edge of science and technology, including artificial intelligence, conflicting views around gender and the end-of-life care, are just some of the things that shape our current context and are often live issues in the lives of congregations and the communities in which they serve, and which call for our prayerful response. We can all benefit in these tumultuous times from taking a breath, pausing to inform ourselves of the facts before we then act or speak. We are part of a worldwide church. Our prayers and our actions are thus informed by the shared lived experience of people in many places, including some represented in our midst at this assembly, for which we are more than grateful. These wider partnerships, as well as bringing opportunities for mutual support and cooperation, also afford us the possibility of informed reflection and the acknowledgement that there are aspects of our past as a church that we look on now with deep regret. The legacy of Slavery's report gives substance to such a part of our history. As we seek to humbly acknowledge this and think about how we apologise, this requires further work and preparation, and this is what the Forum is asking this Assembly to agree to. The report helps us to understand better the historic relationship between chattel slavery and the Church of Scotland and the continuing legacy of that abominable practice. We offer this report on the clear understanding that the Assembly will want to affirm that we are members of a church that is actively anti-racist. We note with sadness that the illegal and immoral invasion of Ukraine is still a cause of devastation, primarily for the Ukrainian people, but also for Russian families whose loved ones have been lost in war. It's estimated that over 8 million Ukrainians have become refugees since the conflict began in February of 2022. we pay tribute to Ukrainians and all those seeking sanctuary in Scotland who have come to live among us as they work to integrate in communities far from their homeland. We give thanks for the compassion of so many who have opened their homes or have worked in their communities to offer hospitality and welcome. The Forum has worked with local churches to support Ukrainians through the work of the Scottish Faith's Action for Refugees. Also, through the generosity of church members, we have been able to send over more than £400,000 to support the Reformed Church in Transcarpathian Ukraine to help local congregations who have been supporting displaced people from eastern Ukraine to the Reformed Church in Hungary and St. Columba's Church in Budapest in support of those fleeing in war. With powerful voices using the plight of refugees and asylum seekers to sow seeds of division, we are called to remember who we are in our responses. We remember that compassion can't be rationed in the face of urgent need. Welcome, when offered sincerely, cannot be bound by caveats or limited or by hostile processes. Moderator, who we are is revealed by how we treat the refugee and the asylum seeker. The ecumenical pilgrimage for peace to South Sudan was an important witness of our shared concern and prayers for that region. The report was written before the situation in neighbouring Sudan deteriorated, potentially affecting the fragile peace in South Sudan. It's a reminder that there will always be people seeking refuge and asylum in our world, and it will continue to fall on us to create humane and positive ways of engaging with people who are on the move, people seeking a new home. It is in our own ancient faith tradition a part of who we are. We are grateful to not only our mission partner based in Rome, who helped coordinate our response to meet the needs of those affected by this situation, but to all our mission partners who represent us internationally. An increasing factor in migration is climate change, and we have witnessed the devastation droughts and floods can cause, with the most recent news of tropical storms destroying refugee camps in Bangladesh weighing heavily upon our hearts and prayers. Part of the Church's response to climate change has been through the work of the Net Zero Strategy Group, with representation from across the Kirk's decision-making bodies. This group has been working to coordinate our response. Whilst this challenging piece of work has been slower to progress than we would have hoped, tools are now being made available to assist congregations and the whole church to better analyse their energy use and environmental footprint. We recognise that trying to reach net zero by 2030 is going to require effort from us all and hard choices of how we use energy, what efforts we take to reduce energy use, how often and by what means we travel, what policies we put in place to embed net zero thinking in our planning, and how we can offset carbon emissions. Project Eve, a project designed to work with congregations to install electrical vehicle charging points, whilst well-intentioned, has floundered with the complexity and slow timescales that often arise within the Kirk, an example of how we must do better if we are to remember who we are as shared inhabitants of this one earth. What it is to be human is a question that is at the heart of much of the present debate, also around artificial intelligence. There is no doubt that there is an astonishing creativity on display through computer scientists working on AI, artificial intelligence. I did ponder asking ChatGPT to write this speech. It might have been better. The increased exposure through press coverage of these kinds of systems are revealing how massive amounts of data are being manipulated by algorithms. Some of it is fun, some of it is serious, as systems in healthcare help doctors with diagnosis or treatment options. Some of it is deeply troubling, as we learn how AI is being used in surveillance systems. The SRT project has resources to help us engage at a congregational level with these issues. Earlier, I said that the church's work is continually developing. This week, Faith Action staff have a new initiative, as the catering in the Rainy Hall is a collaboration between the Grassmarket Project and Hive Cornwall. With every lunch you buy, we can distribute meals to people in Edinburgh struggling with food insecurity. Your feedback can help shape the possible future of this new work. Finally, moderator, the work of the Faith Impact Forum has been a great example of team effort, with staff and members giving sacrificially of their time and talents. I want to take this opportunity to thank them all for their work and their support. In all that they have done, they have been a witness to who they are as a church in society and the world. Moderator, I present the report of the Faith Action Forum, and as I'm not a commissioner, I invite the Principal Clerk to move the deliverances.
I move the deliverance. Seconded.
Well done. Thank you, convener. Now, with a tiny bit of trepidation, but a lot of faith, I am looking at my screen and I'm calling for questions to the convener. If it isn't a question, fear not, but I want to take the questions first and then we will move on to comments. So on my screen, we have a question from Cara McGoldrick, Richard Baxter. So Cara and Richard. Cara.
Cara McGoldrick, 588. First, I need to mention how beautiful and respectfully worded the Drug and Substance Misuse Report is. It's really reflected God's image in the way it treats and talks about all individuals as humans and children of God, and for that I thank you. However, I must say that I was a bit concerned about the lack of emphasis on the children who are affected. Children are only briefly mentioned in the context of families and in the context that adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, are related to substance use later on in life. ACEs is a blanket term for many things a child can experience throughout childhood and adolescence. One of these being child neglect, which is also mentioned briefly as it's linked to physical problems of substance misuse. There's a link. It's a cycle, a vicious cycle. Children who've experienced trauma related to drug and substance misuse, particularly when that trauma has remained untreated, are more susceptible themselves to misusing drugs or other substances, which then affects their children. In order to help stop people getting trapped in this vicious cycle, we need to help the children. Let's stop letting God's children fall in the river in the first place. This report is filled with guidance for local congregation and educates us about adults who are affected by drug misuses, but I feel that something is missing. We also need to think about how the youngest of God's people are affected and what we as a church can do to support them. And so I ask you, is there any guidance or information being produced for local congregations to help them consider the children impacted by drug and substance misuse?
Thank you, Cara. Convener.
Thank you for that question. A very good question, thank you. Yes, we have heard you, and we are planning, as part of the future deliverance, to work more on this. So yes, thank you for your question. We take note.
Thank you. Richard Baxter.
Microphone 41, please. Thanks. Richard Baxter, 167. Can I declare an interest for a short period? I chaired the Net Zero group. One of the most positive and helpful aspects of the work that I saw during that period was the development of a Net Zero pathway, which was designed to give congregations a range of actions they can take at different speeds and different places, but making sure that everybody had some actions they could take. I do see a reference to that in 4.4 in the deliverance, in the report, sorry, although there's not a specific deliverance on that. The report mentions that the pathway was expected to be launched in spring 2023, and even in Edinburgh, we're getting towards the end of spring by the end of May. So is this a piece of work that's still ongoing? Has it already been rolled out and have I missed it? Or is it still to be rolled out? And if so, when will that be? Thank you.
Thank you, and I want to thank the Commissioner for prior notice of this question, so I can provide you with a detailed answer. So the Pathway to Net Zero web resource is designed for congregations and includes ideas, suggestions and resources to help measure, reduce carbon emissions, and where it is unavoidable, to role offsetting as well, what role offsetting might have. It is in development now, and we hope to launch as soon as we are able. We cannot put an exact date, as we are relying on colleagues in the communications department with whom we work closely and have very good relationships with. But we understand that the web editor based in the national office is soon to leave for another job, and we can anticipate a period of vacancy for recruitment process. So thank you for your patience, and Commissioners should keep an eye out on the Church's website, the social media channels, Life and Work, for when the pathway is published. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. And we have one more question from Andrew Fothergill. Name and number, please.
Andrew Fothergill, 458.
Thank you.
And my question relates to, well, thank you, first of all, to Impact Forum for the report. My question relates to Section 10.1. There is no deliverance in relation to this. Section 10.1 relates to the conversion therapy ban. Following the decision of the General Assembly of 2022 to support a ban on conversion therapy, my question is, does the Forum oppose the call for a broad interpretation of that ban, which includes prayer and pastoral care or counsel for those who are struggling or questioning around issues around their human sexuality? I mean, I have an interest in this, as I'm sure many pastors do, because we do engage with and pastor counsel people who are questioning their human sexuality. If a broad interpretation of the conversion therapy ban is embraced, that would make such conversations illegal, possibly criminal, as in what's happened in the Victoria State in Australia. So I'd like to know whether the Forum opposes such a broad interpretation of the ban.
Okay, I've taken advice. We're going to engage seriously with the Scottish Government in the dialogue in relation to this, and we are also consulting with the Theological Forum, so there is further work to be done on this. That's where we are at present.
Thank you.
So the Forum hasn't considered this question exactly, so we're still engaging with it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Seeing no more questions, we have several people who are going to comment, but before we do that, does the Assembly receive the report? And online. Thank you. Okay, we're going to begin with Stuart Gillen and then Dawud Nasser, and then we'll move from there.
Thank you, Moderator. Stuart Gillen, 506. I wish to thank the convener and the members of Faith Impact Forum for the very careful work that lies behind this report, which is so evident, the weaving of spiritual journeys and work for social justice and justice for the planet. It's wonderful to read. It needs more than one reading was the problem, but thank you so much. If I could draw your attention to Section 5, International Partnerships, and in particular 5.3, the Middle East. I wish to thank the Church for the opportunity and privilege that it is to serve St. Andrews, Jerusalem, and Tiberias, and to serve our partners in Israel and Palestine, and to do this with the Reverend Muriel Pearson and also with Joanna Oakley Levstein, who's a commissioner here to Assembly, the clerk of the Presbytery of Jerusalem. And Joanna may just want to give indication of where she's sitting and wave if she's still here. She's ducked. What a clever, very person. We have received wonderful gifts of welcome, acceptance, and trust. Partly, I think, because of the legacy of those who went before us in this work, and also the strong bias of our partners to welcome over walls and hospitality over hostility. I want to highlight very briefly, Moderator, 3 of those partners, one thing about each one. First, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land gave us, in the event, the very thrilling ordination of the Reverend Sally Azar, the first Palestinian woman so to be ordained. It is changing the face of the church. I was sitting among many women bishops from the U.S. Anglican Communion who were telling stories of their own journey toward installation as bishops and saying she's going to have a very tough row to hoe. And it's very hard for me to imagine just, in how many ways that's going to be difficult. But we seek to walk with her step by step and support her. And it's been good to get to know her so far and to see Marjorie Payton a couple of weeks later drape a Church of Scotland tartan scarf around her neck, see her love it, keep it on throughout the Q&A. And it took on, immediately she was wearing it, a liturgical quality. The Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem is led by Archbishop Hossam Naum, who last week was installed as primate for all of the Middle East in the Anglican Communion. He led us on the Via Dolorosa on Good Friday morning. That's on the Western calendar. It was all repeated the week later. And I found in the run-up to Good Friday, we being St. Andrew's Church, Jerusalem, and Tiberias, have the lead. We are given the lead of stations 3 and 8, Stations of the Cross, on the way. Station 3, Jesus stumbles for the first time. Station 8, Jesus addresses the women of Jerusalem. And Moderator, if you're around next year, I'm sure it's yours. The Rabbis for Human Rights, we have a long standing relationship with them. And in particular, recently as 2 weeks ago, Muriel was on a march that was organized by them, a multi-faith march for justice and peace, and was asked to speak, not knowing exactly what march she was going to be on. All of a sudden she's speaking. And when the thanks came back from Anton, the director, to her and to us, it was to say, we are proud to have the Church of Scotland as our partner, which is very humbling and encouraging to hear. As you will know, it has been a most difficult year already in Israel and Palestine. On the 25th of April, Israel observes Memorial Day and remembers its war dead and those who are killed in the violence. And there is a very brave minority of Israelis who hold, and this year was the 19th, an annual joint memorial service celebration with Palestinians. and some 160 were able to get permits to be in Tel Aviv for it. But there are 15,000 Israelis who, with abuse being hurled at them, went ahead. And I had not realized it before, but one of the things that makes for peace is people being able to come together in grief across the lines. And this is happening, and it's a ray of light even in grief. I want to say more generally, such partnerships with sister churches, people of other faiths, with human rights and development organizations are an integral part of the life and work of the Church of Scotland, integral to our existence as a church. It is vital for us, not optional, that we continue to journey together in all weathers with such partners, seeking to deepen spiritual communion and to strengthen partnership in God's mission in the world. And as you've noted, we are privileged to have Dawood and Jihan Nassar and Father Nael Rahum, and happy to give way and hear from them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and as you are on my list, that is absolutely fine. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here. My name is Dawood Nassar, 528, overseas delegate. We are very honored to be here, me and my wife, to be participating at the General Assembly. It's been an inspiring time for us. We are coming from Bethlehem, Palestine, where the world became flesh, at a time when the land was under difficult political situation. Today, more than 2,000 years later, our situation there is not that different. We have a ministry called the Tent of Nations, and it is based on a 100 acres family farm located southwest of Bethlehem on a hilltop that is 950 meters high above sea level. The land was purchased by my family more than 100 years ago, and we have all documents that prove our ownership to this land. In 1991, the Israeli military authorities declared our farm as state land. They want to confiscate it and build a new Israeli settlement. Since 1991, we are in a legal battle with the Israeli authorities to protect our family farm and spend 32 years between military and Supreme Courts, but without giving up. We keep knocking at the door for justice, like the old widow, and we will continue doing that until we see the sun of justice rising again. We faced many attacks from Israeli settlers, especially between 1991 and 2002. And at the Tent of Nations, we have no access to running water, no electricity, and no building permit. With all what we are going through, we still live with our Christian value of refusing to be an enemy. This is our fourth way of nonviolent resistance. The Tent of Nations has 4 principles. We refuse to be victims. We refuse to hate. We are acting differently based on our Christian faith, and we believe in justice. Dear friends, we are called to be witnesses of Christ. It is not that easy today to carry on with what the disciples started 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem. Today, the Christian presence in the Holy Land is being challenged. Christianity in its homeland is becoming a small minority. Our holy places are becoming like museums, just visited by international Christian groups, but where are the living stones? Jesus said to his disciples, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses starting in Jerusalem." Jesus spoke to a small minority that was able to make a big difference. These words are talking to us today, we, the remaining Palestinian Christians there. We have to continue with the mission the disciples started and to continue to be Christ's witnesses in that area of the world. With all the restrictions that we have at the Tent of Nations, no electricity, no running water, and no building permit, still we became more determined not to give up. On the contrary, this situation forced us even to become more creative and even more environmentally aware. We have solar power system for generating electricity, cisterns for collecting rainwater, natural caves for meetings and living. This is the creative, positive, and constructive way of nonviolent resistance. With the Tent of Nations, we are transforming our frustration constructively and opening the farm for people to come and see and then go back home and tell the story of steadfastness and hope and become peacemakers and change makers in their own communities. At the Tent of Nations, we offer different programs and activities, including tree planting campaigns, harvest camps, children's summer camps, and women empowerment projects. We host international guest groups and short and long-term volunteers. The Tent of Nations is becoming a light on the hill, a place of healing and hope. Today, we are still struggling in the courts to protect this hilltop from the danger of confiscation. Thank you for standing in solidarity with us and with our just cause. We want to make the Tent of Nations totally self-sufficient. We want to install small wind turbines for generating electricity, purify the rainwater to be used for drinking, recycle the gray water to be used for irrigation, produce biogas out of the compost to be used as a cooking gas. Any help and creative ideas are welcome here. Our long-term vision for the Tent of Nations is to establish an educational environmental center focusing on alternative energy, renewable, organic farming, recycling, and community building. I would like to invite you to visit the Tent of Nations and to continue to keep us in your thoughts and prayers. Of course, thanks for Church of Scotland for the work that they are doing in our region. I always say the journey for justice is very long, but we keep going with faith, with love, and hope. Thank you for accompanying us on this journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for speaking to us. Thank you very much.
It is always so important to hear the voices of our friends from overseas, and the Clarks were being generous in their non-use of the bell. But just to remind everyone else that we are operating to a 3-minute, and your challenge, of course, is to finish before the Deputy Clerk gives you the first warning at 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Niall.
Moderator, I'm Nail Abu Rahmoun. I'm the Anglican or Episcopal Vicar of Christ Church, Nazareth, number 600. I convey to you salam and peace and greetings from Archbishop Hussam Naoum, just mentioned, and the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem. And he met actually at the coronation with the former moderator Ian, and they talked about the assembly. So greetings to everyone at the assembly. It's a historic and important partnership between the Episcopal Church of Jerusalem and the Church of Scotland, and we'll continue to work together to deepen the relationship through partnership and exchange and many different activities and programs together And it's been like, even in Nazareth, we are closer to Tiberias than Jerusalem. So we have been always welcoming ministers. Like now, Muriel, I probably will meet her on Saturday morning. And then also before that, Kate and Colin Johnson. So we've been for a long time in a good relationship and friendship together. And I ask you all, please continue to pray for peace, the peace of Jerusalem, as we mark the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, the Palestinian Nakba catastrophe. After 75 years, the only thing I can say, the word is enough. Enough is enough. It is time to end the occupation. It is time for life, time for reconciliation, peace, and justice, time for healing, time for freedom and security for both Palestinians and Israelis, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Druze, and others. In the land of the Holy One, believe me, there are many people of goodwill. Not very often on the news, because you get other news, but there are many people involved in peacemaking. I'm personally involved in different interfaith programs and activities, and there are many others. So please pray for this work, for the interfaith work, and support it. I'm not sure how many people from the Church of Scotland visited the Holy Land. So please, I invite you to come and visit us as pilgrims, as peacemakers. Join us. You can join our services. We can do it bilingual in Arabic and English, and you can sing the same hymns in both languages. So you are most welcome from the Church of Scotland, and you are welcome as moderator to visit us as well during this year. So that is, coming to visit us is very important, and it's a great support to our presence, to our ministry as Christians in the land of the Holy One. But when you visit, it's also important to see and meet other people as well, and not only Christians. Thank you.
Thank you. Call on Martina back on, and let's think, and Aaron Stevens. Okay, which microphone are you on?
83.
There's, you're on. Go for it.
Okay, moderator, Martina Bacon, 578.
Great.
Sometimes it feels as if the church doesn't listen. You are not paying attention. We constantly hear you say you want more young people to get involved. You want more young people and young families in the congregations, but you are not ready to listen to what we have to say. Following some of the things the youth reps have said in the hall this week, we have even had people seek us out to tell us that we are wrong. As young people, we don't always think the same things. In just the same way that as adults, you don't always think the same as each other. You might like to think you know what our opinions are, but have you actually spent any time with us and really listened? Have you taken the time to hear from more than just one young person? While I have greatly appreciated my time at the Assembly as a youth rep, I have also felt deeply frustrated and even angry, as it has felt like what we have said has only been listened to on a surface level. We haven't really been heard. So I want to encourage you, as we all approach this report, to really hear young voices, and then to go back to your congregations and do likewise, as we seek together to form the church and follow the call to be God's hands and feet in the world. Thank you, moderator.
Aaron Stevens, 501. Moderator, the congregation in which I'm a minister was mentioned in the report, and I wanted to add a few lines to that. And I'm mainly going to mention numbers. For people who don't know us, our congregation has a regular worship attendance of about between 40 to 50 people each Sunday, maybe sometimes a bit lower, sometimes a bit higher. In my opinion, that's not a very large church, but we've been able to do great things, and not at all to our own merit. We've been operating a food bank as part of our response to the war in Ukraine. Again, as I say, about 40 to 50 people in regular worship attendance, but we live in a country that is experiencing 45% inflation, 45% food inflation. It happens to be ranked the #1 food inflation in Europe. Yay, #1.
Let me check.
But because of the generosity we receive, even though we are a relatively small congregation, this week, as in other weeks, we will have 95 families receiving food parcels from us. 280 people in all will receive a kilo of potatoes, a kilo of onions, a kilo of bananas, tomatoes, turnips, and as well as vouchers to make purchases of their own. We don't do this alone. We have a partner organization. They also have major sponsors, but some of their major sponsors have somehow managed to promise more than they delivered. And this means for the past 4 months, essentially, we've been carrying the costs, which we are able to do only because of the generous giving of so many others. So if we're listing the numbers of families fed and the number of people fed, then what I cannot count is the number of thanks that we owe so many people, including people here, Church of Scotland presbyteries, Church of Scotland members, congregations, and including some money from central funds. Significant support, without which I am sure the food bank would no longer exist. But as mentioned in the report, we're only a response to the war. The war is taking place in another country. I've had a chance to cross the border into Transcarpathia to visit the RCH, the Hungarian Reformed Church partners in Transcarpathia. Other important numbers to note is that they have, when we were visiting there in January, rationed electricity. So electricity might be on for about 8 hours per day in winter when the days are short. That electricity, that 8 hours, is divided. Maybe 4 hours here, maybe 4 hours there. Might be reliable, might not. But because of support from sister churches, partner churches, the manses all have generators so that they can keep electricity running. That means people can go to the manses to charge their phones. It also means that ministers with families were able to stay in place even as so many people fled. Just a few more numbers. We visited a volunteer fire department run by a congregation. Their volunteer list is 52 members long, a rota of 52 volunteers. But when we visited in January, there were only 16 still in town because the men had all left. That number 16, when we were there, we were told that the Ukrainian government was making lists of boys 16 years old and up. 16. We asked why, and they said, we don't know. We would like you to know that your support is appreciated, and for Ukraine, our prayers are needed. Thank you, moderator.
I'll call Enoch Bahor. 533. Thank you, sir. Microphone at the back there. Yes, it's on.
Yeah. Moderator, Ini Ukbo 533, one of the overseas delegates. This is my 4th time in this assembly, and maybe this will be the last time in my present capacity as the Director of Ecumenism and Interfaith Relations for the Presbyterian Church of Nigeria. And so I have had the privilege of being part of the conversations for the reforms, structural reforms, and transformation of the Church of Scotland since 2019. And I've been reporting to my church, and we have been accompanying Church of Scotland with prayers as they seek to transform, regenerate, and grow the church. Because like most other churches that are partners with Church of Scotland or were planted directly by Church of Scotland, like the Presbyterian Church of Nigeria, which was planted in 1846, we see Church of Scotland as our own Vatican. And therefore, we wish the church well at all times. We pray for the good and the well-being of the church at all times. You will imagine how Presbyterians in Nigeria felt when the new king, Charles, swore to his oath of allegiance and oath of office to respect and uphold the Presbyterian government. And everybody in the Presbyterian Church in Nigeria was feeling very proud because people were turning to them. So even Prince Charles is your member? And he said, yes, he's our member. And so we want to make a few comments with respect to the report and even the previous report. First, I want to appreciate the emphasis in the report, and particularly the statement of the convener of the Assembly Trustees, where we listened to something that was sounding different and exciting. One of this excitement had to do with emphasis on the way the church should do things differently. One of the other issues had to do with the emphasis on evangelism and missions, and even discipleship. This resonated very strongly with us because even in the Presbyterian Church of Nigeria, as at now, we have just launched a decade of what we call a decade of aggressive evangelism, discipleship, and church growth. And we are making a few suggestions in this respect because we believe that the Church of England has a lot to learn from the church in the global south. And so we are suggesting that there should be a formal conversation between Church of Scotland, maybe through the World Mission Council, as we used to know it, or in another name. There should be a formal conversation between Church of Scotland and the churches in the global south with a view to learning and tapping into some of the things we are doing, particularly to keep our young people in the church. I identify with what the last speaker, our youth representative, said, because sometimes, I think in 2019, I made that observation in this assembly, that when I look at the average age in this assembly, you may be thinking of about 65 as an average age. And the question is, what happens to our church, Church of Scotland, in 20, 30 years down the line? If it were in the Presbyterian Church, the compulsory age for retirement is 65. Therefore, 70% of those who are here would not be in church. So we suggest that there should be a formal conversation. If this forum agrees, it should be instructed to start a formal conversation between Church of Scotland and the church in the global south with a view to enriching the work of the assembly trustees in terms of regenerating the church. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We would like to break for lunch about 1:45. We've got 10 minutes. I've got 7 people with comments. We won't be able to get to you all. If your comments can be briefer, that would be greatly blessed to all of us. And then we want to start with receiving the report straight after at 2 o'clock when we reconvene. So let's start. Oh, sorry, section 2. Ian Young. And then after that, Peter Kershaw, if you can be ready, that would be great.
Thank you, Moderator. Ian Young, 208. It's a question, actually. I've given advance notice to the forum. Moderator, since the dissolution of the World Mission Council, the budget supporting and engaging with the World Church has greatly reduced. It is understood that contracts of our overseas mission workers are not to be renewed, and central office staff numbers reduced. Earlier this week, on social media, you welcomed the presence of our overseas delegates, that they represent our many brothers and sisters worldwide. The Faith Share budget has been an essential component in the promotion and sustaining of international twinnings, both at congregation and presbytery level, contributing towards travel costs. The budget has been reduced from £100,000 to £35,000 and may well be further reduced in the current budget review. Moderator, will the convener commit to protecting the Faith Share budget in order to sustain grassroots engagement with World Church and encourage others to do so? Thank you, Moderator.
Convener.
We would love congregations to still have access to funds for travel. However, we can't make any decisions on budgets. That is for the Faith Action leadership team, which will be part of the new structure going forward.
Thank you very much. Peter Kershaw. And after that, could we have Nigel Chikanya?
Thank you, Moderator. Very briefly.
Name and number?
Kershaw, 41.
Thank you.
On the 27th of July this year, it will be 70 years since the armistice to end the shooting phase of the Korean War was signed. The war still goes on. Korean churches have asked us to pray for peace and to sign their global petition for peace. Very briefly, Moderator, please remember them in your prayers. And if anybody here has not signed the petition yet, please do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nigel Chikanya. And then after that, Aftab Gohar. Thank you.
Nigel Chikanya, 92.
Thank you.
I'm grateful that part and most of what I was going to say has been covered, and I will try to be as brief as I can. I really want to appreciate the work that is being done by the committee. Job well done. And just want to comment and say it's amazing how the church is changing. It's changing in its flavor, it's changing in its color, it's also becoming more diverse. And one of the things that we constantly do as a church is we speak and speak and speak. And so often we gather people around and we say, we are going to, and we often really so much favor this idea of research. And I want to urge the committee, and this applies to many other committees as well, that we don't just speak, but sometimes take time to actually action out, even specifically relating to equality, diversity, and inclusion. In some of our realities, let's take time to take an audit within our structures and actually action out for once. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you very much. Aftab Gohar, and then after that, Roderick MacLeod.
Aftab Gohar, 57. I would like to thank the Faith Impact Forum for such an inspiring report. You have covered almost everything going on in the world. I would like to speak on Section 5 and the part where Asia and Pakistan is mentioned. I would like to thank you for sharing such serious matters in Pakistan, like the misuse of blasphemy law, forced conversions, and forced marriages. These are really very, very serious issues. The minorities in Pakistan are facing, and people misuse the blasphemy law to take revenge from others and just blame them that they have blasphemed against the religion and the prophet. So I would like to thank the Faith Impact Forum and previously the World Mission Council, who has always supported these issues in all levels. And especially I would like to commend the personal interest and services of Asia Secretary, and I've heard that he is stepping down, and I would like to thank him for everything he has done for Pakistan and for Asia. And I hope that the person who is taking over after him will also take a special interest in these very serious issues the Christians and other minorities of Pakistan are facing. So I would like to thank you very much for everything the Church of Scotland is doing, and I would urge the Assembly to please raise these issues and raise your voices against these issues wherever you find any opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'll call on Roderick MacLeod, and if we have time, then Evan Morgan, but we will stop about 1:45. And you'll be glad to know, Aftab, that Sandy had to look very closely at his notebook so he wouldn't blush. So.
Avodarátar Céhid Seach Coig MacLeod. Moderator 475 MacLeod. I wish to refer to item 5.5 in the Faith Impact report, twinning and faith share visits. When the international refugee crisis first hit the headlines, we referred to the Scottish Faith Action for Refugees, in particular David Bradwell, who advised us that on account of our particular location in the Isle of Skye, that our most constructive engagement would be at the sharp end, as it were. And so, as a result, we initiated a twinning with St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Amman, the other side of the Holy Land across the Jordan. And one of our youth leaders and I, supported by Faith Share, were able to travel to Amman and also visit other parts of Jordan with the intention of returning the compliment by hosting the pastoral care team of St. Paul's Episcopal Church. COVID intervened, but I'm delighted to say that in the aftermath of the pandemic, one of our youth groups is traveling later this year to Jordan, where, among other things, they expect to participate in a desert youth camp, along with some of the local members of the church, young people from Jordan, hosted by Bedouin Arabs in the Wadi Rum desert area in the south of the country. They're supported again by Faith Share and Bord Gaelic. They're all native Gaelic speakers. And we look forward to welcoming them home and listening to their experiences after what will be a life-changing visit. So to welcome the return of Faith Share and the support of the Faith Impact Forum and Faith Share in particular.
Thank you. We have two other people with comments, but we're going to hold them over. Comments can come in at the relevant section of the report. I think in fairness to fringe events, in fairness to your well-being, I think we will adjourn now and we will meet again at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.
We move to section 2 of the Faith Impact Forum report. We did receive the report while I was at my lunch, right? Excellent. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's section 2A.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandy Horsburgh.
Sandy Horsburgh. And then we've also got Dan Gunn, Naila Balog, and Tim Norwood. Yeah.
Thanks, Moderator. Sandy Horsburgh, 61. Moderator, I speak as a former member of both the Scottish Churches Racial Justice Group and the Churches Together in Britain and Ireland Racial Justice Network. And I'm grateful to both of these ecumenical organisations for opening my eyes to the reality of racism and also for teaching me how little, as a white man, a white person, I can really understand. Additionally, as a CTBI trustee, can I commend to the Assembly the work CTBI does on racial justice and on sanctuary, not least in marking the 75th anniversary of the arrival of the Windrush and the 30th anniversary of the murder of Stephen Lawrence, both of which fall this year. But to the report. In the ancient world, slavery had no racial dimension. But in the 18th century, as science started to classify and categorize the natural world, even human beings were graded. And white European men who were doing this classifying found, surprise, surprise, that white European men were the very apex of humanity. While the people who were working their plantations in the Americas and the Caribbean as enslaved people were barely human at all. How convenient, we might think. Of course, we know that this science was completely false, but in it we can trace the invention of racism. Racism was invented to justify enslaving Africans and trafficking them to work on plantations. We live in a racist society in which, as we know, black people have lower life expectancy, experience discrimination in health treatment, are treated more harshly in the criminal justice system, and are more likely to live in poverty and face greater levels of abuse. Sometimes racism is deliberate, and sometimes it happens because of thoughtlessness. But all of us have to recognize the biases we have absorbed and need to unlearn. Racism is an ongoing, daily, pernicious legacy of slavery, which permeates every part of our society. So I commend the Faith Impact Forum, and I thank the authors of this report. I really cannot thank them enough. You have shone a light on things that were hidden in plain sight, but things which we need to see and understand. Through this report, we know our cities, our society, our church, and ourselves just that little bit better. And knowing ourselves better, I think our prayer is, may we become better people. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Gunn.
Moderator Gunn 350. I would also like to commend this report. I think it's badly needed. I think, building on our last speaker, Scottish society is still largely in denial about slavery, our role in it, and the long-lasting benefits that accrue to us day by day. 2 weeks ago, I was at a meeting planning for this assembly, and one commissioner was very dismissive about this. This was something that happened 2 years ago. End of story. Or so it seemed. We need to keep reminding ourselves of our past and the benefits which we still enjoy. The debate in Scottish society, I think, is very limited, probably to the universities and to city local authorities. But we need to be part of that debate. The debate may be raging in certain areas, but are we raging? We should be raging with it. Some quick specific comments on the report. I just wish it perhaps had been given more priority. Admittedly, it's the first part of a long, multifaceted report, but perhaps its importance would have been greater if it had been allowed to stand alone. Secondly, the report gives reference to various very important writers and academics who have been leading the way in the last 20 years to change our thinking and inform our thinking about slavery. But there seems to me to be one very serious omission. Emeritus Professor Sir Geoff Palmer is not mentioned. His role cannot be overestimated in terms of informing Scottish society and wider about the links with slavery, and he's pursued this in addition to his own career, going from a lecturer to being the first black professor in Scotland. So he pursued his career and helped to inform Scottish society. And I pay tribute to the work that he did with me in the Scottish Prison Service for over 10 years. I know the Guild have had him as a keynote speaker. I wonder if in the future the Assembly might invite him to speak. Thirdly, I'd like the report to have made more of the compensation that was given to the slave owners and the impact that that compensation had in Scotland, in our railways, in our hospitals, in our schools, and in our churches. And just finally, I welcome all the deliverances, but I'm slightly nervous about them because there are no timescales attached to any of them, no further action. I just hope this report is not a tick box exercise and we can say we've tackled this, we move on, next business. So I hope the convener can assure me on that. TikTok, the moderator said yesterday, the legacy of slavery in Scotland has been ticking very, very slowly. It needs to speed up. We need to be raging. We need to be involved in the debate in Scotland. And as a former moderator said, there is work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to respond, convener? Thank you.
Thank you for those important comments. We would say that this is a work that opens up a dialogue, an investigation as well. While there is a lot of work in the report, we are also of a mind that the church still needs to engage with it, and the whole church needs to consider the response and needs to go to a presbytery level as well in recognition of the enormity of this piece of work. This is an important part of how we respond as people of faith. And we say that all people are made in the image of God, that we are all part of the body of Christ, and where one part of us is hurting, we are all hurting. And this is an important piece of work towards healing and restoration and wholeness towards the body of Christ. So I do not think that we can hurry this. I think we need to take the time that it needs, because it is such an important piece of work.
Thank you. Going to take the next two, and then we'll move on to the section. So, Nelu Balaj.
Moderator, Balaj W01, or number one. Yeah, I can't remember when it was number one. I even got a haircut for this. Anyway, seriously, moderator, I raised to speak in the support of this report and to commend it, actually. A wonderful work, and commending the committee that has done it. I speak also as a former racial justice officer for churches in Scotland. Now, first of all, I think this report is welcome for awareness raising. Now, 15 years ago, that was in 2007, we marked the abolition of the Slave Trade Act. At that time, I was part of the team that organized this event across Scotland. We were the only one, actually, at that time that started to do that. So I was speaking with people around and said, what, Scotland, part of the slave trade? No, there is not. Was very little about Scotland being involved in the slave trade. Moreover, we identified 2 buildings that were linked with the slave trade, quite prominent buildings in prominent towns in Scotland. So I contacted local churches, and guess what? We received correspondence, and we were chastised. Why do we highlight their locality, their town? Are we shaming them? So that was the extent of knowledge, awareness of the slave trade and Scottish involvement just 15 years ago. And also, particularly, I see that the report also shows the church involvement in the slave trade, both us, being involved with it, but also part of campaigning for abolition of the slave trade. I would like also to encourage the commissioners. Now, you are all aware already, the previous speaker has spoken about the fact that there are other organizations in Scotland that are working in this area, especially local councils. Edinburgh Council, also Professor Palmer, Sir Professor Palmer, which is a good friend of mine, has worked very hard in this area, and I commend him as well, and it will be good to have him to speak to us here. So they have done quite a lot of work here. We in the West Lothian Council as well have done this work. However, if you look at the reaction of the people within our in Scotland to the work that has been done, it's quite negative. It's quite, why do we raise this again? Why don't we spend money in other things, especially at this time? I think it's good that we as a society look back and see, look at our history and obviously repair where it needs to repair, but also repent and go forward as well. If we don't look at the past and get the past resolved, we won't be able to go forward. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. We have one more speaker, and then we really are going to move on because we've got till 3:30, and then we're going to have to stop this and remainder it. So I don't want us to get stuck. So Tim Norwood.
I shall be very brief then, moderator.
Thank you.
Before I talk about this particular item, I do want to, my colleagues in Lambeth would want to very much say how much they appreciate working on social impact issues with the Church of Scotland. And I also like to, on behalf of Archbishop Justin, say how important the Sudan trip was with ecumenical colleagues, particularly the moderator. And I hope that over the coming year, we will continue to see more social impact work that we do together. On this particular subject, I know that the archbishops in England are often criticised for keeping coming back to it, as if it's something that is over and we should move on. But of course, it's the consequences of slavery and racism continue. And as long as those consequences continue, we need to keep coming back and thinking about how we act and how we do things differently, not only in acknowledging what's gone wrong in the past, but making sure that the impact of historic racism and slavery is dealt with moving forward. So very much commend the report and encourage us together to look for ways to take action. And if I could squeeze in just one on the end there, I know about time, but just to note the intervention from the young people before lunch. We're having our own discussions in General Synod in July about how to include young people in it, right at the heart of the life of our synod, the equivalent of your assembly, and we'll be looking for ways to bring their voices right into the centre. And since I've got to frame that motion, I'm very much listening to those people who are speaking today and hoping to learn from you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, a question has come up, and it's always in order. Does this have to do with Section 2? And is it a question? It's Nigel Chicania. It's Section 8? We'll wait till Section 8. Thank you. Thanks very much. Section 2A, Assembly. Great, thank you. Section 2B. Thank you. Section 2C. Great, thank you. Section 2D. Thank you. Section 3, and we have one speaker, so Hannah Waters. Microphone 83. You're on, Hannah.
Hannah Waters, number 592. So, as a church and stewards of God, we must not only speak in words, but also in action. I've appreciated the introduction of compostable packaging this assembly, but there exists no appropriate ways to dispose of said packaging. Local congregations still hand out orders of services, are binned almost immediately, or have heating on full blast in the height of summer. Even the moderator's plastic jelly babies are in a plastic tub. To me, the fact that we cannot take at this stage, we can't take these small actions is a significant concern for reaching even the most minimal of climate targets. We are stewards of God's creation, and I believe have the calling to actively save the world that He created. We must be active in seeking new and innovative plans to partner and learn from organisations such as the Young Christian Climate Network and Operation Noah. I would urge this assembly to listen, to act, and to lead, not only to talk and make promises about future action, but we, as the church, must be leading the charge and be proactive. While I welcome this report, I urge commissioners to actively take these words on board and think carefully about how to further lead your congregation, presbytery, and church as a whole.
Thank you, Hannah, and we will duly deal with the jelly babies. Oh, wait a minute. They're vegware. They're vegware. There we go. There we go. So, good deal. Thank you for letting me know that, Donald. Section 3. Okay. We now have a new Section 4 in the name of Carl Irvin. Principal Clark, would you like to, where is Carl?
Online.
Welcome. Do you have a seconder, Carl?
Can you hear me? Yes, I do.
Okay. Let the Principal Clark read
Carl
your...
Irvin, 3-8.
Yeah, let the Principal Clark read your new Section 4, and we will then hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. In the name of Carl Irvin, there's three new sections starting at 4. So I'm going to read Section 4 first, and we'll talk about that, then vote on it, and then I'll come back in 5 and 6 and so forth. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, great. So, new Section 4, urge congregations and presbyteries to follow the net zero pathway and use the energy footprint tool, both of which are to be published by the Faith Impact Forum, to help them measure and reduce their emissions in line with the net zero 2030 target. So that's the new Section 4.
Okay. Carl.
Carl Irvin, 385. Moderator, thank you for the opportunity to present these new sections, and our thanks to the convener for the comprehensive report. And bearing in mind that I've been informed that the forum are willing to accept these, I will keep this brief, and I will speak to all 3 new sections in the one go. For all my adult life, there have been warnings, gradually building in volume, about the damage human activity is doing to the Earth's environment. Increasingly, we are seeing those warnings fulfilled, with melting ice caps, raising sea levels and threatening coastal communities, drought turning once fertile land into useless dust and making ideal conditions for forest fires, and floods washing away soil, destroying homes and ending lives. Last week's flooding in northeast Italy, where 6 months of rain fell in just 36 hours, being just the most recent example. If we carry on as we are, these incidents will only occur more often and with more severity. It's been established beyond reasonable doubt that climate change is a direct result of human activity, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. Positive action to limit the use of fossil fuels is therefore essential. As God's people, we know that He has called us to be stewards of creation and to act justly and to love our neighbour. These new sections aim to help us in responding to that call by using all the means at our disposal to reduce our carbon emissions to achieve net zero by 2030. Secondly, by exploring and taking opportunities to work with others to begin to repair some of the damages we have done to creation through wildlife and biodiversity restoration, and calling on the Scottish Government to do the same. And thirdly, by working with others to call on the UK Government to pledge a fair and reasonable contribution to the loss and damage fund agreed at COP27 to help communities being destroyed by climate change, particularly those that did little to bring this about, and to encourage the Scottish Government to make good on its promises and funding pledges. In the same way that a small pebble thrown into a pond creates ripples well beyond its size, so we should take our own small actions in tackling climate change and trust God to multiply the ripples into meaningful global change. The new sections I am proposing here are the middle 3 of 5 I am proposing over the course of the General Assembly, the first of which I'm delighted to say was accepted by the Assembly trustees and the General Assembly yesterday afternoon. Taken together, these 5 new sections could, with God's help, produce some great ripples. In passing these sections, you'll be grasping the opportunity to demonstrate that we are taking seriously the General Assembly deliverance on net zero by 2030 and the 5th of the 5 marks of missions to strive to safeguard the integrity of creation and sustain and renew the life of the earth. I ask you to support these new sections. Thank you, Moderator.
Then I'll read 5 and we'll go.
Okay. Thank you. I see no names. Is the convener happy to accept? Is the Assembly happy to accept that section? Thank you. Principal Clark. Oh, and online. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. I'll read these two together. Section 5, the new Section 5, encourage the Faith Impact Forum to explore partnerships and opportunities that will enable the Church to contribute to wildlife and biodiversity restoration, and call upon the Scottish Government to do more in their efforts to improve national biodiversity for the well-being of both people and wildlife. The new Section 6 is welcome the decision at COP27 to establish a loss and damage fund and instruct the Faith Impact Forum to work with Christian Aid and other ecumenical partners to call on the UK Government to pledge a fair and reasonable contribution to the Loss and Damage Fund, and call on the Scottish Government to deliver its existing promises and funding pledges.
Thank you. There are no names on my screen. Convener, you're happy to accept? Yes. Assembly, are you happy to accept Section 5? And online? And Section 6? And online. We have another Section 4 in the name of Pauline Waby. And Pauline, you have a seconder, I'm sure.
Arranged for a seconder, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pauline Waby, 49.
Shall I read it out?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Pauline.
Sorry,
you want to
We're
read it?
we need to read it out. Thank you, Pauline.
A new Section 4 in the name of Pauline Waby, and we will renumber, so don't worry about the numbers. Give thanks for the ecumenical pilgrimage of peace to South Sudan and encourage ongoing contact with the Anglican Communion, the Roman Catholic Church and the Presbyterian Church USA to continue to support local and international efforts in peacemaking and reconciliation, and commend the shared pilgrimage as a model of cooperative working.
Thank you, Principal Clark. Moderator, it was good to see the reference in the report of the Faith Impact Forum to the ecumenical pilgrimage of peace to South Sudan. Over the last few days, commissioners have heard several references to this pilgrimage in which our former moderator, the Right Reverend, very Reverend, I apologise, Dr. Ian Greenshields took part. The presence of Pope Francis, the Archbishop of Canterbury and the moderator, alongside representatives from PCUSA, sent a powerful signal to the people of South Sudan that they are not forgotten and that the world cares about and will work for peace in their land. Maybe it shouldn't, but it does matter that people of that status, who attract such media interest, made the effort to go to South Sudan and to spend time with and listen to the fears and hopes of the women, children, and men of that troubled land. It matters too that it was an ecumenical pilgrimage. If our churches can put aside their historic differences and bear joint witness to Christ's love, then perhaps there is hope also for those warring factions in South Sudan. And of course, the pilgrimage brought comfort, encouragement, and support to the church in South Sudan, which continues to work so tirelessly for peace. My new section of deliverance, if agreed, would help to ensure that that support continues, and maybe that the model of ecumenical working, cooperative working, can be used in other challenging circumstances. I hope that commissioners have taken time to visit the photographic exhibition in the Rainey Hall, which depicts the highlights of that pilgrimage. It's well worth a few minutes of your time. The photographs were all taken by Andy, the Church of Scotland's regular photographer, whom you'll all have seen in action this week and in previous assemblies. Please do speak to Andy and commend him. The photographs are amazing. Moderator, I'm pleased that the convener has indicated her acceptance of this new motion. I'm happy to move the new deliverance and to commend it to the Assembly.
Thank you. And your seconder is? Thank you. Great. Thank you. We have two people wishing to speak, Diana Wright and John Arms. Diana.
Thank you, moderator. Diana Wright, PCUSA, Overseas Delegate 534.
Well
That's a lot
done.
to say. I just wanted to get up and to reinforce the pilgrimage. Actually, I don't like using that word, I'm sorry. The journey of the ecumenical journey to South Sudan that we participated in. But I really wanted to stand and highlight the role that your principal clerk, Fiona Smith, because she was also there, participated in this journey to South Sudan with my co-moderator, Reverend Siobhan Sterling Lewis. Because I think that the impact of the journey to South Sudan was more than you saw from the Pope and the Anglican priest and your past moderator, and I know all of that was just wonderful. But for me, a big part of it was the relationships that we started when we had conversations with the Presbyterian Church in South Sudan and the South Sudan Evangelical Presbyterian Church. It was the relationships of support and listening to their stories of what that pilgrimage, what that journey was going to mean to the people. So it was a big media production, but more than that, it was really the people crying out for someone to hear their stories and for someone to hear their struggles for what's been happening in South Sudan and now in Sudan. And because of what's happening in Sudan, they really do need our continuing love and support and prayers. And so I urge you to continue to support the work that's happening in South Sudan because now it is more important than ever. So Fiona, I just really wanted to thank you for the journey that you took with us and for being there with me as all of the other stuff was happening, that we could become sisters in Christ and have that journey together. So thank you very much. Thank you, moderator.
Moderator John Arms, 508. May I thank the Faith Impact Forum for their wonderful report, which has so much to teach, certainly this ecumenical delegate. And also may I just support this latest change to additional deliverance. A few years ago, I had the privilege of being invited to then moderator's residence to meet representatives of church leadership from Sudan and South Sudan. And I think I was invited to that because the Scottish Episcopal Church already has strong relationships in those countries as well. And I was intrigued to meet there some Presbyterian bishops. Now there's an idea. I wonder whether the Church of Scotland has ever thought of that before. But then last year, I attended the Lambeth Conference, which is a gathering of all the Anglican bishops across the world, down in Canterbury, and had the privilege of meeting there a lot of Anglican bishops from Sudan and South Sudan. And not only was I impressed by what they brought to that conference, but it was really quite chilling to share some of the experiences that they were going through in those war-torn parts of the world. And invariably, we discovered that whilst the bishop took up residence in South Sudan, their spouse and children had to live elsewhere, sometimes as far away as the United States or even Australia. So we are very aware of the impact that the conflict has on people's lives, and they told us more about it. Of course, reconciliation requires hard work and long work, and it takes more than a flying visit, however exalted the flyers might be, for these matters to be resolved. But as we've just heard, these headline moments cover up a whole huge amount of work behind the scenes, unseen work of building relationships and building hope together with our brothers and sisters. So as I say, I want to support this new deliverance because it underlines, as I think we've heard throughout today, that faith communities can have a huge impact on peace building in our world. And I think that visit underlined that such communities are relevant to making an impact on people's lives. So, Moderator, I want to support this deliverance.
Thank you. And we have one more person wishing to speak, so T. Evan Morgan. Something later. Oh, no problem at all. Thank you. I understand the convener is happy to accept. Yep. So, Assembly, the new section 4. And online. Thank you. That's passed. We move to the section 4 as in the print, and there are 2 people who are wanting to speak, John Grieg and Karen Gillen. Karen, you're there, so why don't you go first, and then John.
Gillen, 248. One of the great privileges of being able to come to the General Assembly is to have conversations with each other, but also importantly with our international guests, with our brothers and sisters in Christ who've come and share with us, and we've heard from some of them at the Assembly. A few years ago, some of you will remember hearing from the Reverend Ibrahim Nasir, who had joined us from Syria, from Aleppo, just as the war was having full effect, and spoke so movingly of the challenges that the people that he worked with were facing. And just as they were beginning to rebuild after the trauma of war, Syria is struck by an earthquake that has devastated their communities, that has meant that people are living in schools, in church halls, that are struggling to find a warm space, things that we take for granted. And so I would commend this deliverance to the Assembly. I would commend our congregations, even in these difficult times, to do what they can to help to rebuild these communities. And I'm delighted that last night at the Guild Big Sing, we managed to stick £2,057.28. Thanks for the 28 pence. Using all sorts of means, including QR codes. So if you want to stick a £5 in the pot, I've got the QR code and you can do it today. Thank you very much.
John Gregg, 076. First, I commend the Faith Impact Forum for the excellent job they did with working with our brothers and sisters in Christ in Syria and Lebanon in helping the people affected in the country devastated by that earthquake. My question is, though, the epicentre for the earthquake was in Turkey. Turkey was the country that was the most affected by it in terms of both material devastation and human casualty. Do you have any plans to assist Turkey as well?
Convener.
We work through partners to enable us to build church connections. Unfortunately, we don't have any partner church in Turkey at present. So the answer is no at the moment.
Thank you. Would you bear that in mind for maybe future?
We'll certainly keep it on the table. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more people wishing to speak on Section 4. So, Assembly, Section 4. Excellent. Thank you. Section 5. Thank you. Excellent. There's a new Section 6 in the name of Susan Brown. Very Reverend Susan Brown, do you have a seconder? Excellent. Could you say that with a little more enthusiasm, please?
And that was just for turning up.
Okay. And I'll ask the principal clerk to read it, and then you can speak. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. We've got a new section 6 in the name of Susan Brown, and it is right. It's wrong. Sorry. I just suddenly thought that's not right. Sorry.
Down to the word campaign.
Let me see if I can find the right.
It stops at the word campaign.
Yes, I'll read it sat down because I've got the right one here.
Okay.
So, insert a new section 6. Sri Lanka, section 5.4.3.6. Commend the Debt Justice for Sri Lanka campaign. Instruct the Faith Impact Forum to work with Jubilee Scotland to provide information to congregations and presbyteries about the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. Brown, 53, and I'm so glad you put this step in here for me. Can I point you to the report of the Faith Impact Forum, to section 5.4.3? All the information you need is there. We cannot say something like that without taking it any further, and that is simply the reason for bringing this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the convener happy to accept?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I've got Nigel. That's just a hangover, isn't it? We're waiting on section 8. Great. See no one else wishing to speak, so Assembly, new section 6. And online. Thank you. Section 6 as in the print. Thank you. Section 7. And in the print, okay, and online. Thank you. We have a new section 8 in the name of Roddy Hamilton.
It's Robbie Hamilton. Roddy and I often get mixed up.
Sorry
we
about
get each
that.
other's
She did say
emails.
Robbie, I heard Roddy. Sorry.
Right. No, that's okay.
And sorry, Robbie. Seconder, yes?
Yes, it is. Fiona
Great.
Matheson.
Okay, and can I get the principal clerk to read it?
Yep.
Thank you, and then we'll have you speak. Thanks so much.
Thank you, moderator. Insert a new section 8. Note with regret the reduction of Scottish Government funding to third sector organisations, and instruct the Faith Impact Forum to enter into a dialogue on behalf of organisations affected with the government, expressing the Church's concerns about the reduction and the government's practices around funding.
Thank you.
Moderator Robbie Hamilton, 228. I bring this because of conversations that we had at the New Well Wind in Airdrie with 14 groups working in our community. Bare necessities. No, I'm not going to sing. Remember, I spoke about Fagin the other day. Bare necessities, Monklands Women's Aid, Maggie's, Airdrie Food Bank, Airdrie, so many other organisations with Airdrie in it, but organisations in third sector agencies doing similar work in your parishes and your communities. You might not recognise the name, but you'll recognise the work that they do. They're concerned about reduction in funding. They're concerned about the reduction in the number of people coming forward as volunteers, as we are, as a denomination, as a church. I bring it also because of a conversation that I had with my wife. Yes, we do have conversations now and again. And Carol works for the Machen Trust, and our past moderator, the very Reverend Dr. Ian Greenshields, was involved in the inception of the Machen Trust in Lark Hall. And this is when I first heard about this. I tried to go down the political route. I've written to my MSP, and I'm not sure what's happened, but I've written 2 or 3 times. So I thought I'll flag this up at the General Assembly in the hope that you might bring it up with your MSP and that our forum will bring it up on our behalf. I got an email this morning from Carol's boss. This relates to investing in communities funding. In round 1, 276 organisations received 3 to 4 years of funding from the Scottish Government. This year, considering that the needs in our communities are greater now than ever, they have increased since that first. 101 organisations received 3 years funding, from 276 to 101. There's also a concern about timing. You can apply in the June of 2022, but you will not hear until February 2023 whether you've got the funding. So you don't know whether that particular area of your work is going to continue, whether you can still employ those 2 or 3 individuals to do that work that needs to be done. So there's an issue about funding, there's an issue about timing, there's an issue about early intervention, because the Machen Trust, like a lot of our groups, are involved in early intervention to reduce the workload of the NHS and social work and so on. Because if you get in early enough, then you don't go down certain roads. There's also a lack of engagement with the statutory sector. And if this continues, this is going to have a devastating effect, because a lot of the people working with the Machen Trust and other organisations like that will not engage with education or social work for a whole number of reasons. Because there's a history, there's a background, there's a fear, there's been judgment in the past. So they won't go down that route. And that's where these third-party sector groups come in. And I said to Fiona, what can we do as a church? Well, we can speak out and ask the Scottish Government, could they look at third-party sector funding? Could they make the funding process that much easier, time better and long-term? Could they make early intervention a priority? And can we as churches support? Yes, we don't have the money we once had, but we have halls and we have spaces and we can help and we can work in partnership. This morning, we heard the story of the Good Samaritan. Someone who crossed the road, and in crossing a road, he made himself vulnerable by embracing somebody else's vulnerability. We make ourselves available as a church, as churches, as Christians, when we cross the road and make ourselves vulnerable. When we make ourselves vulnerable, we make ourselves available and enter into a partnership. And vulnerability is not just about embracing each other's vulnerability and working in partnership with the groups and the folk around us. It's about sticking our head above the parapet and speaking out. Moderator, I so move.
Thank you. Is the convener, I'll let the convener respond.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for raising this important issue. Yes, we would be happy to accept. This work will be made much easier thanks to the recent establishment of the Scottish Government Civil Service of a faith and belief unit. This has been extremely important for our relationship with government, and the staff of the unit have been most helpful in getting us the right contacts to speak to across the civil service on a range of topics. Can I also inform Mr. Hamilton and the Assembly that as part of this conversation, we will raise again the important funding model of participatory budgeting, which allows for communities to provide the lead in funding decisions and which takes power away from the centre and gives local people a voice in support of the principle that I'm sure you've heard before: nothing about us without us is for us. Thank you.
Thank you. There is no one else asking to speak, and the convener is happy to accept. Assembly, are we happy to accept new Section 8? And online. Thank you. There is another new Section 8 in the name of Nathan McConnell. And again, Nathan, here comes the drill. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. And Principal Clark, if you could read the new Section 8.
Thank you very much. Is that what we've got here? Oh, it is. Right. Thank you, Moderator. New Section 8, Refugees. Section 9 is where it's going. Urge the UK government to revise the illegal migration bill in alignment with the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And 1, instruct the Faith Impact Forum to continue to advocate for refugees and immigration policy. 2, commend those congregations which have worked to welcome those forcibly displaced from their homes. And 3, promote the engagement of Scottish Faith's actions for refugees in its ongoing efforts to coordinate the Church's mission to support and care for asylum seekers and refugees.
Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Nathan McConnell, 328. The words of Jesus Christ, "I was a stranger and you welcomed me," have not changed since Matthew the Apostle penned them nearly 2,000 years ago. Over 8.2 million refugees have been forced to flee Ukraine since February 24th, 2022. We have witnessed the fastest exodus of refugees in this current century, which marks only a beginning of successive waves of those coming from places like Syria, Turkey, Hong Kong, Afghanistan, and most recently Sudan. It is into this space that the Church becomes an imperative voice, commanded in the Scriptures to advocate for the stranger, like Esther, one who spoke for peoples in peril and in danger, like James, who advocated for the orphan and the widow, which the Bible reminds us holds the keys to pure and undefiled religion. The testimony of Jesus Christ himself, who is the way, the truth, and the life, and who healed and called those who are vulnerable and marginalized. Therefore, in Christ, the advocate is not morally neutral. It is for this reason that I have proposed this motion that urges the UK government to come into alignment with the UN's Declaration of Human Rights, as well as instructs the Faith Impact Forum to continue its vital work in advocating for new migration policy. To once and for all demand the UK government evaluate and revise its inhumane policy of detention and refoulement within and without the bounds of the United Kingdom. Secondly, may we commend those congregations which have worked to welcome those forcibly displaced from their homes. For us, personally as a family, the honor of housing for 8 months in our manse a mother, Natalia and Olena, from Kramatorsk, Ukraine. For others in this room and throughout this nation who have welcomed through the Homes for Ukraine scheme, those who advocate in their local councils and urban and rural congregations in the cities and on the islands, who have made a way for those who seek refuge. If I may, I'd like to commend the 10 churches in the former Presbytery of Dundee who came together in Brodie Ferry to refurbish a vacant, derelict manse, now a beautiful home for a Ukrainian family of 6. For those who taught ESL sessions, who took up offerings for Christian aid, and for Lord Wallace, for your incredible leadership and encouragement for me personally, and for those who mobilized to make aid shipments, for parish members who visit those still residing in hotels awaiting their first taste of a real home in Scotland. Lastly, we would be remiss without mentioning the final work of Scottish Faith Action for Refugees and their ongoing efforts to coordinate the Church of Scotland's mission to support and integrate those coming into Scotland. The work that they have done is vital, and I and we must thank Sabina Chalmers, David Moody, David Bradwell, and their team for their faithful work and advocacy. May we continue to promote their mission in the Church of Scotland, seeing more lives changed for the Lord Jesus Christ. Moderator, it is with my honor and great joy that I present my last motion in this General Assembly.
Thank you. Principal Clark, I believe you'd like to speak quickly.
Thank you, Moderator. Oh, thank you, Moderator. Apologies to the mover, Nathan, with our bell. And I just want to tell the Assembly it's either too quiet or it has a life of its own. And I'm going to request the Assembly Business Committee look into getting us a new one for next year. But anyway.
There we go. Thank you, Principal Clark. I have Doug McRoberts wanting to speak. Doug.
Moderator, I want to speak in strong support of this. There's nothing new under the sun. When my wife Leslie and I were in Malta about 10 years ago, we spent the best part of a week worrying that we were going to be deported. And the issue was the Maltese equivalent of what Britain is now proposing to do, which is the Rwanda repatriation flights. When Malta's refugee crisis was at its peak, that was also their solution, except in cheaper form. The aircraft had been chartered. It was due to fly a bunch of Africans from various sub-Saharan countries right back to Libya and leave them in a war zone, right in harm's way. They were only stopped, literally with 15 minutes to go, by an injunction at the European Court of Human Rights. Now, this news was dealt with by the Times of Malta on a front-page story the next day. The top half of the page was the frustration of the Maltese Prime Minister, and the bottom half of the page, for reasons I still don't understand, was me saying the opposite. And the picture was there and everything. And we waited and we wondered what was going to happen. Long story short, we got to stay and we got to keep working with the refugees. Governments need to be held to account. Now, the UK government has history here. Much is made these days, allegedly, of safe routes into the UK for refugees and asylum seekers. There are none out of Africa. And if ever there was a way in which they could establish a pattern for doing this, it was Malta receiving its African refugees. It's in Europe, and it's a Commonwealth country, so it doesn't even have a British embassy. It has a High Commission, and there would have been no easier and better way to establish the principle of safe transport and safe routes for asylum seekers. Did it happen? No. We had a list of countries which we prayed with thanks for. Germany, France, USA, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. They helped us shoulder the burden. They took more than their share. The UK was and is at the bottom of the list. 10 years ago, not one refugee taken from Malta, from anywhere. Not one then, not one since, not one ever through that route. If ever there was a government that needs to be held to account, it is the UK government of 2023. Thank you.
Then we go to the electronic vote.
Thank you. Nigel, is this the time would you like to come and speak? Thank you. You've been very patient.
Moderator Nigel, 92. I grew up in Zimbabwe, and one of the things that would happen as I was growing up is whenever a brother or sister is receiving a hiding, you would not laugh in case you also get it. I stand to make a comment as well as a question. And specifically, I'm interested on the part that says the Faith Impact Forum be involved in policy. And it made me wonder if our church is aware of some of our struggles or some of the struggles and challenges ministers from other countries, let alone ministers in familiarization, especially what they go through in terms of the challenges relating to costs of visas, especially in this day and age, and considering the economic hardships. Do we care to find out as a church? If we do, what are we doing? I would think one of the things in the spirit of Ubuntu, not the program software, but Ubuntu as an African philosophy, one of the things we could do is just to note the concerns and the challenges. And I have a question to you, convener, to say, do we know? Have we wondered? Have we done something concerning that? And as you take forward, hopefully this motion, you would engage with the government, especially in relation to immigration policy and the costs that are involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Convener.
I understand that some congregations have paid fees for people coming over, but I think this is something, as the Faith Impact Forum is coming to an end at this General Assembly, that this is something for the new structure, the Faith Action Leadership Team, to take forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Convener, are you willing to accept this motion? Okay. Seeing no other requests to speak, Assembly, are you happy to accept this new section? And online. Excellent. Thank you. We have a counter motion on Section 8 in the name of, there she is, Tara. So we're going to go through the same quick drill. Tara, do you have a seconder?
I do.
And I will ask the Principal Clerk now to read your counter motion.
Right. It's not on screen at the moment. So this is a counter motion in the name of Tara.
That's the existing.
Oh, the existing motion is on the
It's
thing.
on the screen.
Now we've got the counter motion. So you've got the motion in print, and this is the counter motion. Are we all there? Great. So the counter motion is as follows. Note that the historical decisions of the General Assembly have been to support current civil law as to assisted dying, but now recognise that there exists a range of theological views and ethical opinions on assisted dying within the Church. Therefore, in order to represent the diversity of opinion in its membership, agree that the Church moves to a pastoral position of liberty of opinion as regards assisted dying, and encourage an ongoing, sensitive, respectful, and nuanced dialogue about the ethics and practice of assisted dying.
Tara.
Thank you, Moderator. Tara Granados, number 178. I would like to firstly thank the convener for taking the time to meet with me last week to discuss this, and for the clerk's advice and help in revising the format and the language which the Assembly now has before them. Firstly, I acknowledge that this is a very sensitive and difficult topic. Assisted dying often provokes a visceral and emotional reaction, which can make it difficult to have constructive dialogue about. Over the past year, I have been uncomfortable seeing various quotes from the Church of Scotland declaring its absolute support for maintaining legal protections prohibiting assisted dying. I now understand these statements given to the press on behalf of the whole church were based on deliverances like this one that come to the General Assembly to reaffirm the church's stance against assisted dying, as outlined in the end-of-life issues report that was produced 14 years ago. I am not seeking to reverse this position, nor am I seeking to move to a stance of neutrality. I am simply seeking that the Assembly acknowledge a diversity of views within our church. My experience of pastoral ministry is that our current absolute stance can leave us outside the door standing on principle against, rather than inside the room offering care and open conversation about what quality of life and good death means to each individual person and how their family and their medical team can support them towards that. This is something close to my professional experience as a hospital chaplain in America before coming to the Church of Scotland, as well as my personal experience. As a teenager, I watched my mother die of cancer complications in hospice. And now, as an adult, I am watching my father's slow deterioration with advanced Parkinson's dementia. Neither were afforded to make decisions about their end-of-life care based on their own beliefs or wishes about quality of life or their understanding of a good death. This is not a thought experiment for me, but it is based in my lived reality and my experience. As medicine has become able to prolong life, so too has it inadvertently been able to prolong suffering. And as Christians, we have celebrated medicine's ability to play God in one direction, but we have condemned it outright in the other. I personally do not believe that our God wishes us to suffer, and that with appropriate safeguards, society should allow people to choose to end their own suffering through assisted dying. I am not alone in this perspective. We've already heard several times this assembly from the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And in 2016, he also said this: dying people should have the right to choose how and when they leave Mother Earth. I believe that alongside the wonderful palliative care that exists, their choices should include a dignified assisted death. End quote. The deliverance in print assumes that the church is still of one mind on this, when there actually exists a range of biblical interpretation and ethical opinion. If we are a broad church, allowing for a broad range of theologies, I ask this assembly to support this counter motion to allow liberty of conscience on assisted dying and create space for the diversity of ethical opinion to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have several people asking to speak. First, Scott Roberts, and then Scott Rennie. Certainly. Okay. Counter motion has disappeared from the screen. Is there any way to have them both up at the same time? I don't know.
I don't think there is. Can we look into that? Thank you for highlighting it to us, and let Scott speak, and then we'll see how we can do it visually. Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Scott.
Thank you, Moderator. Scott McRoberts, 441. I want to speak in favour of the committee's deliverance rather than the council motion, but I want to do so acknowledging Tara's lived experience and the kindness that motivates your council motion. I deeply appreciate that. I had the privilege when I was studying at the University of Aberdeen of studying under John Swinton, an excellent practical theologian, and I like John Swinton. So when yesterday I Googled John Swinton assisted dying, I assure you it was simply for the purposes of preparing for this debate. Now, John has a discussion on the University of Aberdeen website, which I would commend commissioners to have a look at. It's a 16-minute discussion, and if you Google as I did, you'll find a link to it. In that discussion, he speaks about meaning, about medics, and about memory, I think in ways that really help us with this debate. So he speaks about a friend, a colleague in the United States, a practitioner both of palliative care and of psychotherapy, who, working with a group of people who were asking for assisted dying, reframed the question and began to speak to them about where do we find meaning in life? At the end of your life, where do we find meaning? And by having that discussion about meaning, what that practitioner found was they began to stop asking the question about assisted dying because they were opened up to a conversation about meaning that they hadn't had before. And I would suggest to you that as a church, we could do that. He goes on to talk about medics, about doctors, and the lived experience of medical practitioners who have been through helping people to die and have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder as a result. And I would suggest to you as a church, we need to be very careful about what we suggest to our NHS at this time in its life as well. He also speaks about memory, and we've heard the concept of Ubuntu mentioned today and on Saturday. This is particularly around dementia care, but that idea that when somebody is suffering from dementia, the loss of personhood that can involve, and that we don't lose our personhood simply because I think, therefore I am. That individualism is not how we need to understand personhood. That personhood can be held in collective memory. That I hold your memory, you hold mine. That's so important, I think. And it's not just confined to dementia care, actually. There's so many reasons people would look for assisted dying. And actually, in all of those, I would want to say to us as a church, can we, if we're talking about remember who you are, remember who we are, can we believe that being part of the body of Christ means that I hold your value and you hold mine, and therefore we live in Inverness, St. Columba under the banner Here for Life. And I just want to promote to us as a whole church that with one voice, we would say Here for Life. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you.
Assembly, just to let you know, our bell has finally broken. So, but we are still on the 3 minutes, and I know this is a very important debate. So when you're speaking, if you see me stand up, you know I'm the bell.
Okay.
And if you keep going longer, I might start screaming. So I leave it to you. Thank you, Assembly.
Thank you. Yes, Tom.
If anyone's looking to see the text of the counter motion, you will see both the motion and then can click the link to see the counter motion. If you go to three buttons down from the current live debate, where you see Faith Impact Forum, you'll see all the deliverances and all the new items there.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll call on Scott Rennie just to reassert what the Principal Clerk said. If you go over your time, you're taking time from somebody else. So please be concise. This is a very important discussion.
Moderator Scott Rennie, 491. First of all, can I thank Tara for being so brave to bring her counter motion. It would have been easy to let this pass without a discussion, and I think we're grateful to you, Tara, for going where angels maybe would fear to tread. I can't speak for John Swinton or anybody else in this Assembly Hall. All I can bring to this debate is my own experience as a parish minister. I used to feel very strongly on this. I was very anti-assisted dying until one year, while I was a parish minister in Brechin, one of my parishioners was going in the cottage hospital and for 2 weeks suffered. She was dying of cancer. There was never going to be any other outcome. It was a matter of how long it would take. She was the quietest, most dignified woman, well, one of them anyway, that I ever met in my ministry career. And she was devastated by the fact the last 3 weeks of her life she spent defecating in her bed and with incontinence, and there was no escape from it. And she said to me constantly, I went to visit her every day, and she would always say to me, I want to go. Why won't it let me go? Why won't they let me go? And that really changed my mind. In some sense, moderator, life is a gift, and it is God's gift to us. But when you receive a gift, you also take responsibility for that gift. It's been given to you. And I can see now that there are circumstances where people might fairly want to say, it's time, I'm ready to go, I want to go. There are many other jurisdictions where this is made possible with all the safeguards and, that are possible. So as the motion doesn't really try and change that much, but just opens the door to the fact that within our church there are different views. That's kind of why I'm prepared to support the motion today. And I'm really grateful to Tara for letting us have this conversation. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. Moira Taylor Winterskill, and then Justin Taylor, sorry.
Moira Taylor Winterskill. I'm a firm believer in for everything there's a season, a time to be born, a time to die. And my 18-year-old daughter died in 2015, and that did nothing other than confirm that for me. We were fortunate that we didn't have to take the decision to turn off the life support machine. But I find that I'm in the strange position of being pleased to see Tara's motion today, because my mum has long been in favour of assisted dying. And we watched the Prue Leith debate. I don't know if many of you saw it, but it's well worth watching. And I was firmly aligned with Prue's son, and Mum was firmly aligned with Prue. Prue was pro-assisted dying. But I think it's too linear just to say we as a church disagree. I think, like in maths exams, we should show our working out. We should show our thinking. My thinking is that whilst Caroline was in a coma for the last 3 days of her life, I have an absolute conviction that God was moving in her life that entire time. So that is why I think I'm viscerally against assisted dying. But like Scott, I know that there are many people who, because of other experiences, are very much for it. So whether it's something we refer to the Theological Forum or whether we agree something today, I think we need to do more than a simple statement as is proposed in the original motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Justin Taylor and then Judith Thomason.
Thank you, moderator. Justin Taylor, and I am 492. I have to declare an interest that I am a member of the Faith Impact Forum, but I speak of my own accord today. I am a hospital chaplain, and I work with the palliative team to deliver holistic care for patients dying in our local hospital. And if I'm honest, the current full stance of the church is out of date with current practice and ethics. But on a personal level, I watched my mother die as her breast cancer metastasized into her brain. The person who made me, who with God knit me together in her womb, my rock and my best friend, I watched her suffer. And I'm so grateful, as one of the benefits of being a minister was I was present in a way I might not have been if I'd done something else. I was able to see what was happening to her because I'd seen it in my congregation members. I was the one who had to hold her in her pain, hold her hand, and as she was getting sick, and introduce her to a grandchild she had never met before, and was the one who had to decide to do not resuscitate her. The most harrowing decision I've ever had to make in my life was when I said, it's okay. I had to make that decision because my siblings weren't around. I could do this because I followed her wishes. I knew what she wanted because I had the conversation that my family couldn't, again, because of my job. She had asked that at a certain point, she did not want to be alive anymore. And that time had come during her illness. And the sad part for me is that she suffered past her wishes. Death is traumatic. And as an organization that deals in resurrection, we don't do death very well. You only have to look at our church buildings. But that can change. We can do death better. I will give an example that often we use the word assisted suicide, and I'm grateful that we haven't used that word today in the debate. But the word suicide has a very powerful, painful connotation in our modern society, and often it's associated with mental health issues. This is not a mental health issue. This is a dying with dignity issue. I want to be pastorally in the room for my congregants in their most vulnerable state. I want to be able to be there in a non-judgmental way, offering love and acceptance in the decisions that is personal and harrowing, not to be the person who tells them what to do with their bodies. What I'm asking for is not a loss of rights for those who believe in this. I'm asking that my view and understanding of care is represented by the breadth of opinion in this church.
Thank you. Judith Thomason, and then we'll take Liam Fraser.
Microphone 41. Judith Thomason, 204. This won't be a wonderful, eloquent description. I was so relieved that this counter-motion got brought up today. I woke up in the night. This is such a small part of our debates. My mum and my dad both had horrible deaths, and I am very much for the choice of assisted dying. I think everybody should have the right to die with dignity and make that choice. And I would not want my church to make that blanket decision that it shouldn't be allowed. I am very pro everybody having a choice and a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Liam Fraser. You're on.
No. Thank you. Liam Fraser, number 8. I think all of us in the chamber today will have had experiences of loved ones and often of parishioners who've passed away in traumatic and deeply painful situations. Both as a grandson and as a minister, I've been at people's deathbeds where they've suffered for days and sometimes weeks in agony. And while palliative care has increased dramatically over the years, there are still situations where it can't do everything. And all of us have felt pain in these situations and a sense of helplessness in not being able to help those whom we love and who we care for. But what I'm slightly concerned about in this motion, as it's phrased, is that for me, it gets things a little bit backwards. It talks about moving the church to a position of liberty of opinion and encourage ongoing respectful nuanced dialogue. But for me, because it is advocating for a change of position and then dialogue, in fact, it should be the other way around. We should have the dialogue and the research and the reflection first, and only then change our position. Because I don't have time to bring a counter motion, I'm simply then going to speak against this, not because I do not care about people who are dying. I care deeply for people who are dying. but because I think we need to have the nuanced discussion, reflection, and time to process this first as a church, and then and only then change our position. We should not change our position first and then have the reflection and the dialogue. So I'm going to speak against this, but with the proviso, perhaps, that the Theological Forum, Faith Impact, and other relevant parties can talk more about this issue and perhaps come to next year's assembly with concrete proposals of how we move forward as a church, rather than simply accepting this come to motion and changing our position before we reflect on it fully. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm not. Going to take, I want to keep this as balanced as possible, and I realize how sensitive it is. So I am going to take Catriona Templeton, Ian Cathcart, and Colin Sinclair in that order, and then we are going to go to the convener.
Epileptic. During COVID, I was given a letter from a national charity telling me what documents to take to hospital if I was admitted, because some of the health boards had decided, because of the way I think, because of the way God made me, my life was worth less than anybody else's. They didn't have enough ventilators, so people with certain disabilities were getting automatic DNRs. They were going to take my choice away to live. But even with that knowledge, I have friends, I have family who I've seen die in horrible ways. And I know there's certain things that I would not like to lose. They're all over my body and my mind. And when I get to that, if I get to that point where I'm not who God made me, I would like the choice. And I feel that this is about choice, where if we're not, you're letting people make their own decisions. And that's me.
Thank you. Ian Cathcart, then Colin Sinclair, and then we are going to go to the convener.
Want to Ian Cathcart, 168. Want to thank the person who's made the counter proposal. I am going to speak against it, but I do not wish to impugn the reality and authenticity of how she spoke about the death of parents. It's a profound issue. My difficulty is that when this debate takes place, where we swap various stories of pain and death, we literally lose sight of the bigger picture, because understandably people are immersed in their own personal grief and difficulty. If we look back over the last 5 or 10 years, every single major contentious and divisive debate in this hall has had a spectrum of opinion. It is by definition the reason why we have these impassioned debates. We cannot simply say that because there's a spectrum of opinion and there's different ideas and there's different feelings, and there's one group over here who are going to be really, really mad if we take this point of view, that we just don't take any point of view. That is not how we do things. We, as has already been said, we have a proposal as to a new point of view. We theologically and biblically and pastorally reflect on it, and then we vote, and as a denomination, we decide this is what we'd like to say. The BMA, the British Medical Association, moved to a position of neutrality on this. And they did so because they know they are the practitioners that are going to put the needles into the arm. And they specifically said what was said in this debate. There is a spectrum of opinion. Different doctors think different things. they should find the groups and sources of input to their decision-making that allow them to reach a conclusion. If a doctor comes to a pastor, a minister in this denomination and says, "What should I do? I need spiritual guidance," are we honestly saying that as a denomination, we're really just going to hand the question back to you? You decide for yourself, because we're not going to say anything. There's a big spectrum, and lots of people get really angry if we don't say the right thing. We need to have a decision, and we need to hold a position, and we need to pastorally support people who go through this, because that's what God would wish us to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly.
Moderator Alistair Cumming, 488. During this debate, we've only heard from people in the hall. I do know of commissioners online who have made a request to speak but have not been called.
Thank you. We don't know from this who's online and who's not, but thank you for letting us know that. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate that. One of the key things is to ensure that we have equality of debate between online and in person. We genuinely do not know who's online and who's not. So you know, and the moderator's already called who is to speak, but thank you.
Thank you. But it's good that we've cleared that up. I don't know who's in the hall and who's online. But thank you for that. I also, while I'm up, we will be going back to the proposer, so we'll be going back to Tara after this and then to the convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Sinclair, 66. My point one is simply one of in terms of competency. This is such a big issue. It has expressed such heartfelt concerns, but we're doing it within a time constraint, with a deadline. We have not had an opportunity to hear articulated why people felt the position that's been the consistent position of the Church was the position that they've held, and it wasn't simply from dogmatic or doctrinaire things, it was also from personal experience and from pain and from travelling with people through bereavement. It is a complex issue and it deserves to be treated seriously, but to not have had the work for us to look at together makes it hard to come to a responsible decision affecting the life of the Church. And I would like to support what Dr. Fraser suggested, which is to say this is so important, and there is such a wide range of genuinely heard views among us here and online and in the Church, that we need to ask the Theological Forum or the Faith Impact to come and bring that before us so that we can together, prayerfully, not under pressure, make a responsible and agreed decision together. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We now have a third counter motion, so we are going to take a break and come back. One thing I would like to say is this is a very sensitive discussion, and as we have said, there are a lot of different deeply held views and experiences in the room, so I would ask us not to applaud. Thank you. We have a third counter motion in the name of Jonathan Fleming, and I would ask Jonathan online. And Jonathan, if you have a seconder.
141, Jonathan Fleming. Yes, Moderator, I have a seconder, 231, the Reverend Brian Kerr. Perhaps if it was if in accustomed with the traditions we've had, could I ask the Principal Clerk to perhaps read the counter motion?
Principal Clerk.
Thank you, Moderator. So we have a second counter motion to Section 8 in the name of Jonathan Fleming. It reads as follows. Noting that the historical decisions of the General Assembly have been to support current civil law as to assisted dying, but now recognising that there exists a range of theological views and ethical opinions on assisted dying within the Church. Instruct the Faith Impact Forum, the Theological Forum, and other relevant parties to explore such views and opinions and report to a future General Assembly.
Thank you.
So,
Jonathan speaks to it.
No, we need to sort this.
Having heard the views that have been expressed in the room today, and again, I am offering my grateful thanks to Tara for bringing this up, I simply offer this as an opportunity to provide a window of space and grace to explore this further and to report to a future General Assembly. And with that, I will offer it to the General Assembly for consideration. Thank you, Moderator.
Very much. And I would ask Tara if she is happy to consider this.
I'm happy to withdraw my motion in support of this.
Okay. Is the Assembly happy for that motion to have been withdrawn? Okay, thank you.
Are they online? Is they happy to?
Okay, there are.
We have a point of order, Moderator.
We have a point of order. Alex Shuttleworth, is that? Thank you, Alex.
Shuttleworth, number 294. It's a point of order stroke clarification, which I think the Principal Clerk will be able to help us with. The people do not speak on behalf of the Church. The General Assembly speaks on behalf of the Church. Therefore, if somebody comes for comment in this calendar year, for example, for a comment from the General Assembly, is the Church's position that which currently exists, or is the Church's position that we are now engaged in looking at this again?
We would take, depending on the outcome of the decision, we will take that decision, and that will be what the General Assembly's view is. So I can't, you know.
That we're looking at it.
Well, we don't know the answer to the debate yet. We haven't voted.
Yeah.
So that's so. Well, I mean, Laura the procurator wants to speak, but we would be saying we would look into it. But of course, the decision would still be what it was, but we are looking into it. So it would be a combination.
But yes, I think that, Moderator, that was all I was going to say. I think the Commissioner is asking, well, does the current position hold until, if different, this new group has reported, or do we in some way remove the current position? But I think in agreement with the Principal Clerk, the current position holds until changed.
Okay. So current position, so for clarity's sake, and you can jump up and say, no, that's not it, that the current position would hold. However, we would caveat that with, and we are looking at this and discerning theologically over the next year. Okay. Is Assembly clear? Okay. Thank you. Cool. Yes, please explain what we're going to do next.
Right. Thank you, everybody. So we're now back to section 8 as in the print, which is the motion being put forward by the Faith Impact Forum. And we have a counter motion in the name of Jonathan Fleming, which we've all heard. So I will read, well, I've read it, already read it. So this is where we are. And if the Assembly would like, we will then hear from Jonathan, but he's already spoken. To close the debate, it's then the convener. So if we're at the Assembly Moderator, if the Assembly's of the mind and you are, that we're at that space, then it would be, if Jonathan wishes to say anything, anybody wishes to say anything, and then we would move to the convener who will close the debate, and then we will move to an electronic vote, and we'll explain how that works at that point.
Thank you. I would like briefly to call on Liam Fraser as the convener of the Theological Forum. Liam.
Thank you, Moderator. Simply to say that I'm grateful.
Name and...
Thank you. Number 8, Liam Fraser. Just to say that I'm grateful for Mr. Fleming for bringing this counter motion, and want to commend Tara as well for dialoguing with us at the table there to come to a kind of common mind about it. So I'd like to support Reverend Mr. Fleming's counter motion and urge the Assembly to vote for it.
Thank you very much. I feel we have had a full, grace-filled discussion, and now I'm going to ask the convener to close.
Thank you, Moderator. It's been said this afternoon in what I'm sure has been a very traumatic time, a meaningful time, emotional time too, and taken many of us to places that we often don't like to visit, those vulnerable places where we hurt. Death is traumatic and we tend not to do it very well. There is fear around it. Both my parents have died. Both of them I sat beside and accompanied them. I was grateful that for both it was in some ways a peaceful death for them. Life encompasses birth, living, dying, and how we make meaning out of that is we need the theological forum, we need the theology to give it depth and link it into our faith. The forum would resist the counter motion. The General Assembly of the Church of Scotland supports the existing law as it is and the protections around the end of life, and is opposed to a change to allow legally assisted dying. This wording is consistent with the position of the Church of many years, and the Forum and its predecessors have considered this very difficult issue on numerous occasions, just as we have done in bringing it to this year's General Assembly. It's always challenging when that position is questioned by personal experience of people. However, there are wider ethical considerations that arise from the views of entire sectors of our society, including those affected by issues of disability. The Forum is not persuaded that the reservations of people who might feel themselves adversely affected by a change in the Assembly's policy have been met by any alternative proposal that we have so far encountered, or that significant reservations over safeguards have been adequately put in place. The Forum recognises that this is an intensely difficult area for many people. It is also acutely aware of the need to considerably improve the quality of palliative care for all our society. To have a process of good dying and good death. And I know that sounds odd, but yes, good death is what we all want. Moderator, the Forum cannot accept this counter motion, and I would very respectfully ask that its mover withdraw it to seek to engage with the Forum's successor to consider together how we might move on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. We call for the vote, and I will ask Michael to explain how this will happen.
Moderator, Mayor 567. To ensure that the Assembly is absolutely clear on what we are doing, we are now taking either the motion or counter-motion and voting for which one should stand, following which there will be a further vote as to whether or not we accept whichever is successful in the vote. Those in the hall will use their Bluetooth handsets. You will vote 1 for the motion or 2 for the counter-motion in the name of Mr. Fleming. Those on the Assembly Hub have the text and should vote for either the motion or the counter motion. There will be 30 seconds in which to cast your vote, and you may change your mind throughout that 30 seconds. Whichever the last button you press is the one that will count. The vote is now open. Ten seconds remain. The vote is now closed.
For the motion, 103. For the counter motion, 225. The counter motion passes. We now vote to accept or not the counter motion. I think because this has been such, and I know we're pushed for time, but I think we should do that again as an electronic vote, and then we are absolutely certain about the will of the Assembly. Michael.
Those in the hall will vote using their Bluetooth handsets, pressing 1 for or 2 against. Those using the Assembly Hub will utilise the buttons that have appeared in the Assembly Hub. There are 30 seconds. The vote is now open. Ten seconds remain. The vote is now closed.
For this new section, or this section, 238 against 71, it definitely carries. And thank you all. Let's take just a second, draw breath, and have a prayer. From before our first breath till well after our last, God, we are yours. Thank you for breathing your Spirit in this space, holding the grace, and helping us listen in the silence. Amen. Thank you. Okay. We move to section, no, we're going to go ahead. We're going to see how we can, yeah. We move to section 9. There's no one asking to speak. Assembly. Thank you. Section 10, we have one person requesting to speak. Martin Fair. Martin, thank you.
Mike 61, Martin Fair, number 319. Moderator, 2 ministry colleagues invited me to lunch just recently, and had I known they were going to a public house, of course I would have declined. When we got there, though, it was the name of the establishment that grabbed my attention. It was called The Outsider. Some may be familiar. The Outsider. So where am I going with this? On Saturday, we listened with great interest to the Lord Lyon, who essentially offered a rationale for, first of all, the ceremonial aspects of our assembly, not least Saturday itself. And then he went on to offer what he believed to be all the positives that flow from we as the Church of Scotland having good relationships and being alongside the state, as he put it, the establishment, as we might say.
Sorry, just checking if this has to do with
Number 10.
with section 10.
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
So he talked about the benefits of us being alongside the establishment. I'm happy to have listened to that and to absolutely have to respected that point of view. I'm comfortable with it, but I'm absolutely committed to the church being alongside the outsiders. Okay. And that's what came to mind this afternoon at lunchtime. We've talked about refugees and asylum seekers. We've talked in an earlier section about those in extreme poverty who are most affected by the cost of living crisis. And in number 10, we talk about those who struggle with addiction and substance misuse. These are the outsiders. Jesus would have been there, and the Gospels make that abundantly clear. So while I am reasonably comfortable being a church that is alongside the state and the establishment, I long for us to be even more alongside the outsiders named in this particular deliverance.
Thank you.
And so, while number 10 calls for research, and I welcome it and can't wait to see it, we do not need either research or deliverances or permissions right now to be alongside the outsiders and to position ourselves with them and where they are. That can happen now. Let's be, in the terms of number 10, beside those who struggle with addiction and substance abuse. The lepers, might I say, of this age, with whom Jesus would most certainly have been. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. Thank you, and apologies for having doubted you. Thank you. Section 10. And online.
Thank you, moderator. Before we finish this deliverance as a whole, just to inform commissioners that you have a right to dissent in relation to any decisions we have made during this session, and the paper to sign your dissent will be, as always is, under the picture of Queen Victoria's chaplains, which is over there. Or by email. Thank you very much, Donald. Much appreciated. Or by email. So either under the chaplains or by email. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. Thank you. and the deliverance as a whole. And online, thank you. And thank you so very much. And I would ask Karen if you would come forward. Thank you. I'll put these on so I get it right. Karen, taking on something midstream is really brave. Taking on something midstream when the current is fast, ever-changing, unpredictable, unlikely or likely to overflow or go dry without any warning, asks for a whole new level of courage. And you took on the convenership of the Faith Impact Forum in August 2022 with such grace, with wisdom, and with good humor, thank goodness. Thank you for your uniting presence, your inspirational leadership, and your self-effacing, low-key, it's not about me mentality that was glue to a forum in transition. Your colleagues call you a joy to work with. I can think of no greater accolade. The prayers and good wishes of the General Assembly go with you as you move into a new iteration of service. Karen, every blessing. Thank you.